Alright, well, I've got a box of parts from Roger at 928RS, which means it's time for another project on the 928. So, I think what we're going to get started with today, and with any luck, maybe be done with today too, is cleaning up this intake and resealing it and replace all the hoses underneath it. So, there definitely is some oil seeping under the intake in the V. Can see some of it. I think it's seeping out of some of the gaskets for either the oil filler or some of the PCV hoses. It's just seeping through. Anyway, I have no idea if this has ever even been done before on this car. Doesn't seem like it has any vacuum leaks, but I figure it's definitely something good to go ahead and do, especially before I go throw those pork and chips on it. So we'll go ahead and start tearing this down and see what we're getting into. Alright, well, we've got the airbox and the plenums off of our intake here. And as with every time, there's some oil in the intake. One of the things I was thinking about doing and honestly kind of forgot about was seeing about getting some of the oil baffles. I think Greg Brown sells some and Roger might sell one for the oil fill too. I bet if we go over to the side plenums we took off, they probably got oil in them. Yeah, there's definitely some oil in that side, and probably the same deal over here. Yeah. Alright, so now we're pretty much at the time where things can start getting messy. So we're going to have to get the fuel rails off, so got to get the them disconnected from the damper. So let's see here. I don't think I've cracked these loose before, so I'm hoping it'll come loose, and it did. It's a little wet already. I sprayed some Croil on the threads to start. Alright, so took out the two bolts there and there that hold the fuel rail in. My thinking here is that it'll be easier to unhook the wires once the injector rail is popped off, because there's really not a way to get in there. So I'm going to see if it'll just lift off. I think I felt a couple on the seat. Figure as soon as I turn off the camera, I just pull a little harder on each end and it pops off. So hopefully we can get to the connectors. Alright. I think I can get the shop vac there and just vacuum real quick around the injector ports so that nothing gets in there, and then put something in those to block it off. Well, first sneak peek down there into the valley that is kind of oily and nasty looking. So this is some of the fun stuff you find when you buy a car with no history. So two of these injector connectors look a bit melty on the sides. The other two don't. And it's not starting from the connection, so I don't think it was a electrical thing there. But they look hot nonetheless. And then I find this vacuum hose going to the smog pump valve is melted. And then I just found this other vacuum line going to this, I think this is the idle speed up thing for when the AC's on, was melted. So something fishy has gone on here before, and I can see a couple other little pieces that I suspect are that vacuum line, so I guess we'll see what we find when we get under there. But alright, so with the injector rails off and sitting down here, I'm going to clean them off too. Trying to give this a shot. Put the injectors in this ultrasonic cleaner with some gas. Hopefully clean them up, not just the outsides, but hopefully the inside too if anything's going off. Anyway, gonna go ahead and get the intake runners off. and then can see what we're dealing with under all of that. Alright, so currently I'm avoiding doing something I really don't want to do that much, which is clean up the mess in the valley. So it's a good time to rebuild some of the injectors. So I've already verified that they all operate and they all pass fuel through them just by putting some gas in the end and blowing through it with a hose and working it with a 9-volt. But all these things are pretty simple. Just pop the cap off. Yeah, that's how you pop it off, apparently. Got a whole bunch of these little Bosch injector kits. Now, and that little spacer thing they come with is actually not quite twice as thick as the one that's already on here. See, it's like twice as thick. And I don't know. I'll have to actually crack open these instructions and read one of them. But at the moment, I don't think it looks right, so I'm just gonna use the old ones. New O-ring on the bottom, and a new O-ring on the top, and call it good. And now just have to do this 7 more times. Alright, so took the 2 little bolts off and lifted the throttle body on out of here. And as you can see, we've got a nice messy pit. I guess all this oil was just coming through the intake and just seeping through the hoses and around O-rings and stuff. So we're going to, I guess, just have to vacuum it out or see what we can sop up with some paper towels, but yeah. And here's the offending article over here. So yeah, it's all kind of nasty. Apparently there's another mount there that was broken that I missed. But yeah, this thing's it's all oily, I guess, coming from the intake. So yeah, we're gonna have to do some cleaning here. Alright, so we've been working on some boring cleaning stuff. So turns out there is a throttle body under that pile of gunk. It actually looks somewhat shiny now. We have repainted the intake. Went ahead and used a crinkle coat on it, and then silver aluminum. The rest is sitting in here. Kind of hides the fact that some of the old paint didn't want to come off. And now we are going to start working on getting the water bridge off, because I have some new seals for that. And probably going to paint it at the same time. Alright, all the bolts are out of the water bridge, and did things the lazy way and just undid the hoses up here and let the water drain down and put a pan under the car. Because I didn't think about draining the coolant any before got it disabled. Ah. Well, that's annoying. Was not planning on changing the oil, but I guess now we are. I don't know if a lot got down there, but any is more than I'm comfortable with. Bollocks. Well, we're committed now. Alright, so went ahead and cleaned up most of the sludge that was under the water bridge there. There's a little bit of stuff there that I'll run the vacuum on real quick, but most of it's cleaned out. Still more stuff over here that needs cleaned out, and a bit on the heads. That honestly, I want to put the water bridge and the oil filler back on before I do anything else there, because I really don't want to knock anything else towards the oil fill, because that goes straight down into the crankcase. Like you can see the connecting rods down there. So I don't want to get debris in there. I already got a little bit of coolant in there, which I'm not happy about, so gonna have to change the oil right after we get everything back together. So anyway, we'll go ahead and get the water bridge and oil fill on, and then we'll proceed with cleaning this up. Alright, so we went ahead and put the water bridge back on for now and got all the coolant hoses set up to it. Whenever I took it off, it only had the O-rings on it under the little ports where it goes to the head. The kit I bought came with both the O-rings and the gaskets, and it looks like on a lot of the later cars they recommend putting both on. This thing really wasn't leaking and only had the O-rings on it. I'll go ahead and put my pressure tester on it, and I'll let that sit for, a day or so. And I figure if it's gonna leak, probably would show up then and, pretty easily be able to, look around and see if any water's coming out anywhere. Alright, so what I went ahead and did was, first of all, cut the gasket in half. That way I could just put these two runners on. And I put some RTV, just lightly smeared, on the mating surface between the manifold and the gasket only. Didn't put anything on the side with the head. But this should at least give me some sort of idea where the vacuum lines for the PCV and stuff on this side need to run. We've gone around and run all these little vacuum lines to all the fuel pressure dampers and the regulator, the emissions valves. So, still waiting on a couple parts, namely the baffle to go under that oil fill tube. However, we can put the driver's side intake manifolds on because this is the one that sort of goes over it here. So we're going to put that back corner one on now. I already went ahead and made sure the runners are all cleaned out on the cylinder heads there. This way would make a little more sense. There we go. Lined up here. And be good. Anyway, we'll just go ahead and snug those bolts down. The last thing I want to do before I put the intake back on, because it might interfere with getting the valve cover, to change these top pads on the chain tensioners. So the bottom ones are actually really freaking expensive and apparently don't wear that much, so I'm just going to leave it alone for now. But we'll take the tensioner out and change this top one here and take the cover back off on the other side and change it over there. But those are not very tight at all. Okay. As I said, got to be careful not to lose any of the crush washers. Okay, that line's just about out. That one's just about out. And there's one tensioner. So, yeah. This bottom pad is a little bit worn, but we'll leave it alone. We'll just slide the top one off, hopefully. The old one definitely came off pretty easy. This is a little tight. There we go. That was a bit abrupt, if we're being honest. Anyway, nothing too exciting here. Just got to put these same bolts back in and get some new sealing rings on that pressure line. Okay, and while putting the cam cover back on, which is really hard to get it off on this motor, at least with fresh motor mounts, the motor sitting up high, it gets, close to the engine harness and stuff. But anyway, easy to keep track of where these different size bolts go. Tall areas, get long bolts. Areas that are recessed closer to the head, get the short bolts. Simple enough. Every bolt gets one of these flat rubber washers, and if it's got a groove inside of there, a little stepped recessed area, it gets an O-ring too. Simple. Okay, so we've got the injector wiring harness back in place on this side, and all the injectors plugged back in. A couple of the connectors were a little crispy looking before, but I checked and they're, the contacts are fine. It looks like the source of the crisp was not the connector itself, but something else. Either way, all the little wire retainers still fit in and lock them on the injector, so we should be good there. So I've put a little smear of grease on each O-ring there, so now we just got to go get the fuel rail and see if we can finagle that back into place. Okay. Alright, now have to just connect the fuel rail and do the same on the other side. Okay, so we have the fuel rails connected on both sides of the motor, and all the fittings tightened and everything, so fuel system should be sealed. To double check that before we put the rest of the intake and everything else back on, I've gone ahead and jumpered the fuel pump relay. So we're just going to come turn the battery on and then go check for leaks. There you can hear the fuel pump. And I already see a leak around that one injector. Okay, so I think I found what's going on here. Stuck the phone camera down there to get a better look. And yeah, I can feel that it's weird. One of the O-rings didn't sit properly and pushed down the injector, so it's sort of cocked on it when the fuel rail came on. Okay, so the whole intake manifold's back on, and everything with the exception of the mass airflow sensors in. So we'll just set that in with the air box, and then hopefully we will be good to go. Okay, well, we're gonna open and see what happens. Hopefully everything runs fine, and that I haven't made some mistake that's going to require pulling off half the intake again, because that would suck. There might be some air in the fuel line still, so we'll see if it gets cranky about anything there. That's interesting. I was just stuck. Well, nothing obviously wrong. Seems like it's happy. So we'll call that good. Idle's a little high, but it was before too. Wonder if that idle stabilizer valve's no bueno. It's about the same as it was before.